So, Dave, you're a part of Schell Games. What can you tell me about Schell Games? You're all located in Pittsburgh, correct?
Yeah, we're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're a studio of about, like over 100 at this point,
Oh,
folks.
wow.
Yeah, like we got pretty big uh, in the recent years. So we work on a variety of different projects, including Until You Fall, but we do a bunch of
Yeah.
basically our own original IP as well as a bunch of different client-based projects, ranging from location-based entertainment to
Mm.
educational VR to I don't know, crazier tablet games. Like one of the weirder ones that I think we've done is the Daniel's Stop and Go Potty app. So like we've done a lot
Oh,
of wild and weird things and a bunch of other like experimental hardware, experimental
yeah.
games, that kind of thing that I can't even really talk about. But we do a crazy number of different projects on different platforms, and that kind of weird eclectic experience kind of gives us a lot to draw on.
That's awesome. And Until You Fall is basically the studio's newest VR game. The
Yes,
last one I can that or the one that I played was the I Expect You to Die, which was also done by you folks as well.
that's correct. Yeah.
Gotcha.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I Expect You to Die came out, gosh, 4 or 5 years ago at this point.
Yeah,
Time's
yeah,
flying.
yeah.
But yeah, no. Until You Fall. There's kind of a theme with our names apparently. Uh,
Oh,
Until You
I
Fall
didn't
came out
notice.
in August of last year into early access on PC.
I see. Okay. And so you are all announcing, or I guess by the time this goes up, you will have announced that it's coming to Oculus Quest and then PlayStation VR, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And
So
then
the
and then it's coming out of early access then on PC, I'm assuming,
Yep.
at the same time.
Around the same time, we're shooting for as close to simultaneous as we can. But getting this game on to the Quest and PSVR are kind of our top priority, and figuring out how to kind of translate the look and feel of the game to these other
Hmm.
platforms to make sure that we can
I
preserve
see.
kind of the core gameplay and feel of it. So
Okay. So in that case, then, I mean, comparatively with I Expect You to Die, which is this kind of almost like 50s and 60s spy movie turned puzzle escape room VR game, Until You Fall is completely different.
yeah,
Completely,
you could say that.
I've noticed that. How exactly would you describe Until You Fall? It looks like basically like a dueling sort of game almost, or a lot more action oriented than your
For
previous
sure.
title.
Yeah, no, I mean, for Until You Fall, like, I guess the best way I'd describe it is kind of a VR hack and slash rogue light. And
Okay.
the way that we do the combat in the game is almost like this. Almost, we also kind of like use rhythm light. It's not quite
Okay.
actually rhythm based. Like everything about the game is kind of driven you, like driving you towards to get into this kind of combat flow and kind of feeling of combat. Um, and so, the synthwave music, for example, kind of really gets your heart rate going and
Yep.
gets you kind of really into the combat. But the way combat actually works is we have a lot of kind of directed uh, kind of choreographed combat. So like you get
Okay.
block indicators, you get crit indicators, and the idea is that you wear down your enemy's guard by not only hitting them, which you can do because it's VR and you can just swing your
Mhm.
swords however you want, but there are also kind of indicators of like, oh, hold your sword up like this to block, and successfully blocking will reduce their guard, and eventually you
Mhm.
can kind of get to
All
their
right.
main health pool and do permanent damage to them. And the way you do that is by kind of swinging through kind of indicated critical strikes. And do that enough, you kill the enemy, and eventually you'll clear the room, get upgrades, and get stronger. And the idea is that you just get as strong as you can until you fall in combat, and then that progress gets converted into money, which then you can use to buy new weapons, upgrade
I
them
see.
permanently, and do it again. So we wanted to make something very kind of sticky and addictive.
Yeah, yeah, that's I mean from how you're describing it, the sword play sounds a lot more interesting than when I was playing Skyrim in VR and I was just waggling the PlayStation Move controllers back and forth. Seems like there's a little bit more thought into it. Is there a narrative in Until You Fall at all,
It's
or
it's lighter. I mean, we're going for the kind of tropey like, oh, you wake up with amnesia and you're being told that something is wrong. So there
I
is a
see.
story, there is a world that this takes place in. It's a very weird world. It's kind of this strange mix between fantasy and sci-fi.
Mm, mm,
Kind of it's this weird kind of neon hellscape where you are fantasy knights that glow. And
awesome.
yeah, it's super cool looking. And again, like the synthwave music really kind of ties it all together. But the main goal of the game and the kind of main thrust is that like, hey, there's this big monster and you need to destroy it. And so that is the goal. That is the primary goal. And while we hint at a larger world, kind of for this first offering, that is kind of the main drive.
I see. Okay. And I mean from what I've seen of it and how you're describing it, it seems incredibly unique. Is there any sort of like things that you were all inspired by, like other fantasy things at all that
Oh
you
man, yeah.
guys took from to incorporate into this? Because it does have its own identity, so I'd be curious what you were all pulling from, if anything.
I mean, really, it's wild because the first kind of incarnations of this game had a much more kind of traditional fantasy look.
Okay.
Like it was more like, yep, you are a fantasy knight. We had stumbled on this kind of early like hollow looking knights, not Hollow Knight the
I
game,
see.
but like these kind of almost golem-esque creatures.
Okay.
So there was a lot of kind of early exploration there, but then
Hmm.
as we were continuing to develop the game and kind of kept adding features to it, it was kind of like, oh, okay, we're kind of getting really wide and bloated. We need to kind of like focus it back down to just the combat. And one of the core things about the fantasy of the game was just making you feel like a badass knight.
Okay.
And so we did whatever it took to kind of bring you there. And so we looked at influences like, all right, well, how does Doom make you feel badass? What
Mm,
games make you feel like a superhero or a total god?
okay.
And so because again, like as we kind of continue focusing in on like how awesome the combat made you feel, it's like, all right, well, let's from moment one, you are not a zero to hero. You are a sword, or a master swordsman becoming a literal sword god. And so, what do we need to do to make you feel powerful from the beginning? And in terms of other like I don't know, inspirations are coming from all over the place. Like combat wise, like have you ever played Infinity Blade on the phone?
Yes, I have actually. And
Yeah,
so
so like there was some of the choreography there was actually like, oh, actually Infinity Blade did some
really,
really interesting things there. So like, are there ways that could be translated to
okay.
VR, or even we looked at other like I don't know the way we summon our weapons, the Mistborn, not Mistborn, oh, Brandon Sanderson, it's a book. I'm blanking on it. But the way that you summon the weapons in the game, there's some good books that we kind of like describe this kind of awesome power of manifesting weapons out of
Cool.
thin air. And so again, we just really looked for like every way that we could make it feel like a power fantasy.
Awesome. Wow. Okay. So there are a lot of inspirations then.
Yeah,
And is the game mostly, since it's a dueling game, is it mostly boss battles, or is there a lot of grunts that you go through and then you get to boss battles, or what exactly does a level or a run exactly look like in terms of enemy variety?
sure. So I think let's see. I think what we ended up with is about 21 rooms total. It constitutes the run, and the idea is that there's six rooms with standard enemies of increasing difficulty, and then you get to a
Mhm.
boss fight, and then that repeats and over kind of three tiers as we call it. And so in these kind of first six rooms, you start off with the grunts where you can kind of just chew through them because you're a badass, and then
Yeah.
eventually you start getting introduced to new enemy, like different more difficult enemies like knights or captains that force you to physically dodge out of the way, or the spell
Okay.
weaver who actually throws projectiles at you that you need to deal with by like either slashing through them or like kind of using your sword to block them. And then eventually you get to these boss fights where they kind of test you in all these new mechanics that you've been learning throughout the run. And in addition to those kind of basic types, there are kind of empowered versions of those that have even more weird tricks up their sleeves. And so with the during the run, they basically each of these enemy configurations and the rooms are slightly randomized. So like we have handcrafted the different encounters, but the encounters that you will see in an individual run will vary because it's slightly randomized.
I see. Okay. Okay. And then so I mean, to bring up I Expect You to Die again, one of the more distinct things about that game for me was its very unique visual presentation. And so you've already touched on a little bit about the unique visual presentation that's in Until You Fall. Is there like, I mean, it goes really well with the synthwave soundtrack, but how exactly did you all come about like bringing that to like VR and like making that world seem like something that's immersive, because it is not entirely realistic. It's a little bit more not really, not cartoony, but
Yeah, sure.
kind of more over the top. What exactly was your guys' method for coming up with a visual presentation like that?
I mean, part of it, like, funny enough, like the thing that really did bring it together was the decision to have the soundtrack be synthwave. Um, uh,
Awesome.
eventually we had, so yeah, it's funny because originally we had these kind of Hollow Knights that had glowing stuff inside of them, and as we were kind of continuing to push it and try to figure out ways to really get you into combat, because again, this game feels and plays best when you are in the thick of it fighting, not kind of like running around the outskirts trying to hide. And so it's like, all right, well, how do we make this feel like some sort of murderous dance club where you are dueling with a variety of enemies? It's like, well, okay, let's try the synthwave thing. It's like, great, well, we already have all this kind of glowy stuff in the enemies. Let's just really like turn that up to 11 and bring the rest of the environment to kind of feel like like this weird glowy neon hellscape where you are fighting for your life. And so and it's funny because as we continue kind of tweaking the art and bringing it more into that neon space, it kind of further inspired the music. And so it was this kind of circular feedback loop where each thing kind of fed off of itself, and then we eventually kind of arrived at this over the top ridiculous thing.
Awesome. Okay. Then in that case, the synthwave soundtrack itself, did you all pull from existing artists, or is that all like a completely original soundtrack?
This is completely original. Like we definitely looked at things that like made us like, man, what music would feel awesome to sword fight to? And we looked at a lot of references, but eventually we composed our own kind of, like, our art director Justin loves to call it sword wave because it's just slightly different. But yeah, we ended up kind of writing our own thing, which is, it pulls in a lot of different synthwave elements, but it also kind of is like a little bit more dancey, a little more kind of again, really focused to get you moving and kind of bobbing and weaving with the beat.
I see. Okay. Wow. So it seems like there's a lot of visual and auditory aspects that you are all experimenting with in VR to see the potential of what that can be, which is really, really exciting. What sort of content are you all introducing with the 1.0 update that's going to be hitting PC and Oculus Quest and PlayStation VR?
I think the biggest thing will be a variety of different performance optimizations, bug fixes. What's been great about this period in early access is we've been getting a lot of feedback of like stuff that is clearly broken, other stuff that's not actually broken, working as we designed it, but just not making any sense. So like we're trying to clear up kind of anything that's confusing or like perceived as unfair. So there's a lot of that. We're also adding achievements to the game. So got to get those sweet Chivos. So that's kind of like in terms of content, that's kind of the big thing. But a lot of what our focus has been on has been figuring out how to translate the game to these other platforms. So maintaining the kind of unique neon style while actually running at a frame rate that doesn't make you sick.
Has it been harder to work on the Oculus Quest port of the game or the PlayStation VR port of the game?
I mean, so what we've been trying to do is we've been trying to like tackle all of it simultaneously. So really, like, we're trying to find things that will work on the Quest, because the Quest is kind of the lowest powered hardware. In some ways, like, I love the Quest, and it's probably one of my favorite headsets. But like a lot of the stuff we were doing on PC, a lot of the post processing, a lot of the kind of, I don't know, high intensity visual effects have had to be reimagined or kind of rebuilt so that they run at frame rate. Because the thing we're trying to avoid is like, oh yeah, no, it's like we can have the game, but there's no visual effects, and it's really hard to have a neon hellscape when there's no visual effects in our game. So it's just been a lot of kind of head scratching, making sure we're looking at the right and most important things to like preserve the feel of the game as well as preserve the combat read. So it's like we're figuring out like, hey, what effects are absolutely mandatory in our game? How do we translate that to something using the kind of new constraints that we're under on this platform?
Gotcha. I'm very excited for this game. Is there a price at all for the Oculus Quest and PlayStation VR versions of the game?
Yeah. So right now we are planning to release the game when it hits 1.0 for both actually PC and on the new platforms. We're shooting for $24.99. So right now the game is about $20 on Steam and the Oculus Store in early access. So it'll be a slight price bump to kind of reflect all the content that's gone into the game, all the work for optimizing and stabilizing it. So.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you again. And the 1.0 update will come out. I mean, when you all can figure it out.
Yep. Soon, TM.
Soon. Are you guys going to do post 1.0 content at all? Is this something that you guys are going to keep working on for quite a while, or
I know
think
I
you're
would
just gonna
love
finish it?
I would love to. I think we built this game to be expandable, like from the
Okay,
beginning. The whole goal, and
awesome.
like compare it, like working on I Expect to Die is it's been great, but the puzzles are all handcrafted, and so it's like kind of the thing
Yeah,
where it's like, oh,
yeah.
it's kind of a one and done experience, and like everyone loves that game and has a great time with it. Something we tried to do with Until You Fall was have it be more replayable, more easy to add new content to it, and that was kind of like one of the early decisions we made to like how do we make something that can be easily added onto
Mm,
for a VR
yeah.
platform, and so well, that's a long way of saying no official plans yet, but the hope is yes. We're just kind of wait and
Just wait and see.
see how the launch goes on the new platforms.
Awesome. Well, I hope the best for y'all. Thank you so much for stopping by, Dave.
Yeah,
I
thanks for
really
having me.
appreciate it. I hope it works out for you guys in terms of getting this game out there, because I love synthwave and I love, or swordwave, I guess. I
Yes,
learned a new word
TM.
today.
You're right.
So really excited for it. I'll be playing that on my Oculus Quest. So
Awesome.
good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll tell you, it's pretty cool right now. It's not done yet, but
Okay.
it's looking pretty
Okay.
cool.
Awesome. I'll look forward to it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much.